If you're worried about having a stroke, if you've already had a stroke and you're interested in preventing another one from happening, then listen in. There's some news that I just want to discuss with you. I'm calling it news. It's not very new news. Some of it is old news. But I think it's worth talking about. More people need to hear this. So there are three main areas where we can work to reduce the chances of a stroke: diet, exercise, and smoking. Let's start with diet. Humans have been around for 100,000 or 200,000 years, and we live in such a way that we've evolved to eat cooked starches, mainly cooked roots, cooked vegetables, a sprinkling of fruits and nuts and seeds. We evolved in a very rich environment, which is great. So you might think, well, we'll eat lots of fruits and things like that. But also the truth would be that as we were evolving into modern humans, that the competition for those kinds of foods would have been pretty stiff indeed. There's quite a bit of evidence that we evolved in Central and Eastern Africa originally, and other creatures that live there, well, I wouldn't fight them for a banana, I can tell you that. So our niche has been to get a stick, dig up tubers and roots, and cook them. Once man gained control of fire and proceeded then to cooking, probably originally by accident, something left by the fire that wasn't very edible, in the morning, cooked by the slow embers of a dying fire, might well have become quite tasty. And not only tasty, but very sustaining and very satisfying. Once cooked food has been eaten, in effect, cooking partly digests it. And that means that we can extract a lot more from cooked foods than other animals can eat from the raw equivalent. So we stopped having to eat all the time. We could have breaks in between our meals, and so, by having breaks in between our meals, we filled our time doing other things and started making better shelters, starting to use tools more, and other activities, social activities. It's just one example. And over thousands of generations, modern humans evolved into the creatures that we are today. So the question is, what can we learn from that? Well, here's the thing. Farming has only crept in maybe in the last 10,000 years. Perhaps it's a bit more, perhaps it's a bit less. But really, only a dot in the lifespan of the species. So farmed foods are not really in our natural niche. And by that, we have to mean particularly dairy foods. I do believe that humans evolved eating some meat. And as it happens, personally, in Central Africa, I've hung out with people who still hunt for subsistence living. And you know what? They were really rubbish at it. We'd go out and hunt in the day, try to find some food, generally a small deer called a dik-dik. That was the prize. And so we looked for those little creatures, mainly didn't find them, but still went home to the camp to ask what's for tea. And tea had been provided by, must be said, pretty much exclusively the ladies and adolescents who'd been out in the same time gathering, digging up roots, nuts, vegetable foods and starting to cook them, ready to eat. Meat was an occasional delicacy. The lion's share would go to the more senior members. Most of the people would eat very little meat. At the end of World War II, rationing kept going in the UK until 1954. I've seen a couple of sources. One said that each adult was allowed 6 ounces of meat, the other said 8. We're talking 6 to 8 ounces, 200, 220 grams in a week. Very often Westerners are now consuming that amount of meat in a single meal. And certainly very commonly in the space of a day. So the meat consumption has gone through the roof. And the results are in. It's not good. Meat is very rich in nutrients. So you only need to eat a small volume of it to get a lot of energy, calories if you like, a lot of food from a small quantity. So yes, it makes sense when food is scarce to eat some of that. Most of you who can be watching this are probably able to access an awful lot more food than that. Most of the people watching this channel are in North America or in Europe and are able to go to a shop and buy almost unlimited quantities of food. So we are not living in anything like a very natural environment. And so many of us are overeating. So our natural diet, the one that we're built to eat, is maybe small amounts of meat when it's available, not dairy. Cow's milk, goat's milk, it is what it says it is. It's milk for cows, it's milk for goats. They have a very different body chemistry. Let the cows drink the cow milk, let goats drink goat milk, and leave it at that. The bulk of our diet is going to be made up with potatoes, sweet potatoes, rice, beans, vegetables, fruits, small quantities of nuts. I think nature leaves clues. How many nuts will you eat? Maybe one handful, a small handful. So eating a nut roast, as many vegetarians and vegans might do, would be okay once in a feast. But my advice would be, don't do that every day. Bulk of our food, as opined by the likes of Dr. Campbell, author of the China study, should come from mainly sweet potatoes, other root veg, bulky starches, porridges, maize porridge, oat porridge. Very simple dishes. In the West we now have the luxury of making those kinds of meals tasty by adding small amounts of fruit, by adding hot sauces. So yes, do that. In the end, the World Health Organization has clearly stated that a vegan diet, if you care to go that far, is perfectly healthy for all stages of life. Birth, childhood, adolescence, adulthood, old age, during pregnancy, not during pregnancy. It's fine. If you then choose to add small quantities of meat to that, of course that's a personal choice. Exercise is a great way of preventing strokes. and heart attacks and other diseases that involve mainly the linings of our blood vessels, arteries and veins. The problem with exercise as a prevention is that it takes quite large amounts of exercise, certainly to have any effect at all on our body weight, but also to have an effect on the other mechanisms, such as when we exercise, the inside of our blood vessels produces more tiny bubbles of gas that act as a lubricant that makes our circulation better, prevents clotting. You have to exercise quite long and hard to achieve those things. And that might not be practical, especially if it's you sat there wondering how to prevent a second stroke, because exercise after a first stroke might not be an easy thing to get stuck into at all. Most of us struggle with getting into exercise without having had a stroke. And many of us are struggling to get into exercise because we think we should be doing this kind of exercise or that kind of exercise. I'm often asked, Andy, should I start jogging? The answer is going to be no. If you need to ask someone about starting jogging, what that means is you're not jogging. And if you're going to do some jogging, then you have to love it. Because doing it for a week, a month, or even a year is not much cop. It's really not going to get you anywhere. So the key to exercise is finding exercise that you love. Find exercise that you enjoy doing. Find exercise that's meaningful. Find exercise that's functional. It would be far better to start walking to work than starting a jogging program if you're not a natural runner, if you don't enjoy it. Walk the extra stop on the bus. Walk to work. Can you cycle to work? Exercise doesn't have to be incredibly intense to be fantastic at helping to reduce artery and vein disease. It just needs to be sustained. So find something you get pleasure from. Smoking is the easy target. Doctors the world over are saying, give up smoking. Yes, it's addictive. Here's the problem. We're built to be addictive. Especially to things that are similar to the opiates. Because those similar chemicals occur in breast milk. We're built by nature to be addicted to our mother's milk. Good job. Keeps us going. We're also built to stop drinking milk. At a certain age, maybe 6 or 9 months, we start growing teeth and breastfeeding becomes very unpleasant. And mother says, no. It hurts. So we're built to be addicts. And what that means is we can be addicted to all sorts of things. And there are lots of common problem addictions, particularly in the West. Recreational drugs, alcohol are the most obvious suspects, and smoking. If you're addicted to smoking, it's because you're built to be addicted to smoking. And you can't change that. So how are you going to beat it? Well, really the main thing that you can do is change your environment. The people who can beat smoking are those that can see their friends somewhere that isn't the pub, where a nice drink and a quiet cigarette or cigar have been the norm for them. So cutting out your environmental triggers is the number one thing that you can do. So if you do try to crack smoking, and then you do give in and have the occasional cigarette, you don't have to worry too much about that, because you can win. In psychology, a single slip would be called an extinction event. In other words, it's a small event on the way to the extinction of the habit and the addiction. So don't give up. Do give up. Those are the big wins when it comes to preventing stroke. It's not easy. If you're going to change the way you eat, then again the key thing is your environment. The people that you live with, the people that you eat with. If work takes you to business breakfast meetings, or important lunches, or gala dinners, standing out from the crowd isn't necessarily going to be easy. It's easier than it was 40 years ago, but there's still social pressure. So doing what you can to change the environment that you eat in is important. Will you get support from family members, or will you get ridicule? Will other family members join in with you, or will they say, I'm going to eat what I'm going to eat? Those are the difficulties. So have a think about how you might go about it.